Hello, this is Rachel from the Otago Prattville Public Library, and I'm here today to show you guys the easiest way to make cheese on your own by hand. So, what you will need, first things first, get your directions. So, let me take a glove off so I can take a look here. This will be available as a PDF in the comments of this video, and it will explain how to make the cheese and a couple of the library's resources on cheese making that you can check out. This recipe comes from a book called 1 Hour Cheese by Lucero, and it's really super simple. It's going to be super quick and easy for us to make this cheese. The hardest part, honestly, is just waiting for the milk to warm up. So what I did is I actually took the milk out of the fridge just about an hour ago to let it get a little bit closer to room temperature without letting it get into the food danger zone before I heat it up, just to let it kind of speed the process along a little bit. So we have a big saucepan, another saucepan or stock pot over here. We have our stirring spoon and a lid. I've got a little burner set up down here. Let's see. Here's my little burner, a little electric burner. You can use a stovetop if you are cooking at home in your kitchen. I've got a colander and some cheesecloth laid inside of that. And this cheesecloth has been folded over one extra time, so it's a little bit thicker than usual, just so that we can retain as much of the cheese from this process as possible. And you'll see what I mean when we get a little further down the road. We're gonna use a half a gallon of milk today. I went ahead and bought a whole gallon so I can do it again if I need to. And you want to use whole milk or something similar, because the higher the fat content of the milk is, the higher the yield of the cheese that you're going to get is going to be. So the more cheese you get if you have a fattier milk. So I've got regular pasteurized whole milk here. I've got, in addition to my pots and pans and tools, a half cup measuring cup and a big old 1 quart measuring cup. And I have salt and pepper. The milk, of course, the whole milk, and I have some white distilled vinegar. So let me go over the recipe to start. Basically what we're gonna do is I'm gonna double the recipe today. So the recipe that's provided in the paper here will tell you to use 1 quart of milk. I'm gonna do a half a gallon of milk, so 2 quarts. And I'm gonna double the vinegar as well. They recommend to use to 1 quart of milk, which is 4 cups, 1/8 of a cup of vinegar. So I'm gonna go ahead and double that to a 1/4 cup of vinegar. The salt and pepper is added to taste, and then everything else is just the tools for cooking. So it's real simple, very easy. I'm gonna go ahead and get us started. So I'm gonna remove my lid and just set him aside and take my milk and measure out 2 quarts, which is all the way up to the top of this big 4 cup measuring cup. I'm gonna measure out 2 quarts of this whole milk and pour it straight into the pan. And like I said, I'm doing this twice because I'm doubling the recipe, just so you guys can really get through the camera a feel for how much the cheese actually yields versus how much milk you're putting in. The cheese that we're making today, according to the book, 1 Hour Cheese, she calls it First Timer's Cheese in 5 Steps. And she says it takes 20 to 30 minutes. That is actually, believe it or not, very accurate. It does not take very long at all, which is super cool. It's also known as direct acidified farmer's cheese because of the way in which it is made. Okay, so we've got 2 quarts of milk in there. I washed this table off beforehand. Always make sure you have a nice clean cooking surface and that all of your tools and utensils are clean. And I'm gonna go ahead and turn my burner on to medium and start stirring my milk. So for now, it's just looking like milk being stirred. I'm gonna give you guys a couple close-ups of when I add the vinegar in, the chemical process that happens that separates the curds from the whey, creating the cheese. I'll probably do that with my phone or something. But for now, it's just milk in a pot. And so I get to chat with you while I am stirring. It's really simple to make this. A couple of mistakes that I've made doing this in the past, because it can be a little deceptively simple, I'll say. If you add too much vinegar, you will get a lower yield of cheese. If you do not add enough vinegar, you kind of get a lot of milky liquid left over, so the curds haven't formulated all the way and separated from the whey to make the cheese. Another thing is if you heat the milk too quickly, that is no good at all. It will cause the milk to scald in a worst case scenario, and that smells awful and is really unpleasant. Or again, it can decrease the yield of cheese that you end up getting. So you want to heat it nice and slowly, and you want to stir it consistently while you're heating as well. And that just makes sure that it's heating evenly to help build up to that chemical reaction that's going to happen. So we're stirring and we're stirring. The first thing we're going to look for is a little bit of steam coming up from the middle. Around the same time that we see that steam coming up from the middle, we're going to see a little bit more foaminess around the edges. You'll notice some bubbles and foam starting around the edges of your pot right away. And that's, again, just because of the fattiness of the milk. But when you let it heat, it really kind of naps to the side of the pot. It likes to hang out along the edge there. You'll see more bubbles, more foam, and more kind of adhesion to that side edge area of the pot. Let's see. So the recipe says to heat on medium, which we're doing, and it says look for foam around the outside edges of the pot, as well as little simmer bubbles coming from the bottom. Not a rolling boil, but close. So you'll want to see those bubbles coming up from around the outside edge as well. And if you see big or medium bubbles coming up right from the center, you probably overheated it just a little bit. You've probably gone too far. So we don't want to go all the way to a boil, but we do want to get some of that heat and movement in there. Okay, so if you can tell, there's a little bit of steam coming up off the milk, and as you can see when I stir around the edges, there's some foam along the edges and the sides that's sticking to the spoon and sticking to the side of the pot. So that's a good sign. We're getting close. We're just going to wait for a little bit more bubbliness to come in before we add our 1/4 cup of vinegar. I will mention one other thing that's handy to have when you're making this recipe is a timer, or if you have a timer on your microwave or have a watch, because after the milk gets heated to the proper temperature, like I was describing with the foam around the edges, the light bubbling, and kind of just before it gets to that boiling point, that gentle simmer. Once we get to that point, we're going to incorporate our vinegar, and then we're going to continue cooking until it coagulates. Once it coagulates, we're going to cook for 2 more minutes. So most of it is eyeballing, seeing how things look, making sure that the temperature and the consistency and things like that are correct. But there is that one part after the incorporation of the vinegar and the coagulation where you'll want to keep your eye on the clock so that you can be sure you cook it at that point on low heat for 2 minutes. Okay, so as you can see here, we've got a lot more steam. The milk is kind of moving a little bit more freely, and I can smell it heated as well. So we're able to know that it's ready for the vinegar. So I'm going to stop stirring for just a quick moment to incorporate my vinegar. So I'm going to stop stirring for just a quick moment to incorporate my vinegar. We're going to do a 1/4 cup of vinegar. And you might not need all of the vinegar, so we're going to incorporate it slowly. So I'm going to start by stirring and then slowly pour it in. Perfect. The milk starts to separate into curds and whey, so you get the chunky parts and the clearish bit, which is the whey, and the chunky parts are the curds, and the curds are going to be our cheese. So now that it's coagulated, I'm going to turn the heat down to low, and the heat is down on low, and I'm going to look and stir very, very gently so I don't break up my curds. I'm going to stir gently on low heat for 2 minutes. And just slowly pour it in. Brilliant, and let it drain for a moment. Another thing you can do to help speed along the draining is you can move the cheesecloth around a little bit. And like I said before, the curds that stay in the cheesecloth, that's going to be our cheese. So the texture of this cheese is really creamy, kind of like a ricotta or a cottage cheese a little bit. The flavor's very mild. It's excellent on salads, and I like it with some toast and tomatoes and basil as well. So I'm gonna go ahead, this is our little lump of cheese. And I'm gonna give him a little squeeze. Do be careful when you're doing this because it's quite warm. But that just lets the draining go by a little bit quicker. And basically, we've just made cheese. So you saw what I did. It was super easy. It's a little time consuming especially if you double the recipe like I did, to wait for the milk to heat to the proper temperature and to get that stirring just right for our chemical reaction. But you made cheese by hand, so it's worth it, right? And okay, I'm gonna let that sit and drain for a minute because it's still quite warm. And you can season it however you want. So if you have fresh herbs, I highly recommend you chop some of those up and put them in with them. For today, I'm just gonna go ahead and bag my cheese up in a Ziploc baggie with a couple grinds of Himalayan pink salt and a few pinches of peppercorn medley that I grind up as well. So we're gonna just kind of squish the spices and seasonings in with the cheese in the bag to make it super simple. No extra stirring, no extra dishes, nothing like that. This will keep in your fridge for up to a week. It's best fresh. It doesn't really, as I said, it's a very mild flavor, so you can absolutely wait and see how the flavor is affected by being refrigerated for a while versus not. But obviously, if it starts looking funky, toss it out. We don't want anyone getting sick. So that's the gist. A couple other notes while this is draining. Instead of vinegar, instead of the white distilled vinegar I used, you can also use apple cider vinegar. You can use lemon juice, and you can use lime juice. So really anything that's nice and acidic will create that chemical reaction that helps separate the milk solids, the milk fats and solids from the whey, the water, all that other liquidy stuff, and you got yourself some cheese. Also, I have been told that many people like to save their whey. I'll show you. So this is our cheese in our cheesecloth, right? This is the whey. And it's got, kind of looks like lemonade a little bit. But I've heard it's got a lot of protein and it can be great for bread making and some other things like that. So definitely check out one of our cheese making books that's on our list and see what you can do with that leftover whey so that you don't let it go to waste. Okay, let's see how warm this is. Still pretty warm. I'm gonna let it cool for just another couple minutes. And before I sign off, I'll put a picture of the cheese all seasoned up and everything for you guys at the end. But before I sign off, I want to remind you guys that we will be doing all of our summer programming this year online. If you have any questions about the adult summer crafting kits, you can contact me at rparlier@appl.info. That's rparlier@appl.info. Additionally, Miss Barb is doing awesome online programming for children, including also curbside make and take kits. So feel free to reach out to Miss Barb if you have any questions about stuff with the kiddos. If there's anything you have feedback on, if you would like to participate in our Summer Library Club reading challenge, we have logs for all ages. So come on in, give us a call. Come on into our parking lot, give us a call and we will bring your reading logs out to you curbside, and that way you can be entered to win some really fabulous prizes. Okay, thank you guys so much for joining me today, and I hope you have a splendid summer.